Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. My name is Clay, and I am the Bucks believer. The Milwaukee Bucks got off to a great start in Game 2 of the first round of the NBA playoffs. They led 19-5 after just 5 minutes and 4 seconds of gameplay. At that point, Bryn Forbes checked into the game for the first time, replacing Jrue Holiday. His impact was felt immediately. 4 minutes and 23 seconds later, when Forbes exited the game, the Bucks' lead had been widened from 14 points to 21 points as they led 35-14. Of the Bucks' 16 points in that span, Forbes had scored 11 of them. After a short rest, Bryn re-entered the game. Only 29 seconds had passed. Just 23 seconds after re-entering, Forbes made his fourth three-pointer of the quarter. Up to that point, he had already scored 14 points, made all 5 of his shots, including 4 three-pointers, and the Bucks had taken a 41-15 lead that they would never relinquish. In one single quarter, Forbes' hot shooting had swung the result of the entire game and given the Bucks all the momentum they needed to blow past the Heat in a 4-game sweep. Forbes made a significant impact throughout the Miami series as he averaged 15 points per game while shooting 48.5% from beyond the arc. When it was all said and done, the Bucks had outscored the Heat by 19.7 points per 100 possessions with Bryn on the court during that series. That is a ridiculously high number, and it shows just how well Milwaukee played with Bryn on the court. Milwaukee will be hoping to get a similar level of impact from Forbes in its second round series against the Brooklyn Nets. Forbes will almost certainly be able to thrive on the offensive end in the same way he did against Miami. Jrue Holiday will make sure of that. He understands Forbes' game-changing ability and makes a point of finding Bryn in transition and off of driving kicks for open three-pointers. In that electric first quarter against Miami that I outlined earlier, Holiday assisted on Bryn's first 4 made shots, 3 of them being three-pointers and the 4th being a kick-out where Forbes attacked a closeout and made an easy floater shot. Other than off of Holiday assists, there are many other ways in which the Bucks generate looks for Forbes. One of these is through the inverted pick and roll with Giannis Antetokounmpo. In that play, Bryn Forbes screens Giannis's man, then darts to the three-point line for an oftentimes wide-open three-point shot. This play could work particularly well against Brooklyn because Forbes will likely be defended by small guards like Kyrie Irving, Bruce Brown, or Landry Shamet whenever he is in the game for Milwaukee. Brooklyn will not want to switch those players onto Antetokounmpo, so whoever is defending Giannis will likely have to fight through the screen. If Bryn can set a good screen, his defender will have to show a hedge, giving him a split second to find an opening for a look from downtown. Coach Mike Budenholzer will also run plenty of set plays for Bryn. The Bucks have multiple plays where Forbes starts off on the strong side and darts are on multiple off-the-ball screens before flashing to the three-point line for an open look. It takes a disciplined and intelligent defender to dissect those sets. For that reason, I think Nets coach Steve Nash could use Joe Harris on Forbes because of how smart of a defensive player he is. Nonetheless, I still think that the Bucks will be able to get Bryn open for multiple three-point shots per game off of those inbound plays alone. So I look for those to be an important set that the Bucks run throughout the game. And not only do they run those on inbound plays, they also run them in half-court sets. In the matchup between these two teams in early May, Bryn Forbes scored 14 and 12 points respectively while making 7 of his 12 threes in the 2 games combined. I think the Bucks can count on him for a similar level of production, as I'd expect him to score between 10 points, his average for the regular season, and 15 points, his average against the Heat in the first round for this series. I also think that Bryn will probably shoot around 40% from 3 because that's just the kind of great shooter he is. Guys like him usually are going to shoot high percentages from beyond the arc. The question with Forbes comes on the other end of the court, the defensive end of the court. It will be hard for Coach Bud to play Bryn extended minutes if the Nets score like crazy every time he's on the court. And unfortunately, there is a strong chance that that will be the case. There is absolutely no chance that Forbes will be able to keep Kyrie Irving in front of him, and he isn't tall enough to defend Kevin Durant either. So that's already 2 players on Brooklyn that we know going in that Forbes will not be able to defend. Out of the Nets' big 3, the guy that I'd most be comfortable with Forbes defending is James Harden. That's because Forbes puts himself in the right positions and is capable of defending physically, which are both very important when you're defending James Harden. Even with that being said, Harden has a distinct size advantage and will likely be able to beat Forbes off the dribble on a lot of occasions, so I'd be comfortable with that matchup in only very small doses. I also don't love the idea of Bryn guarding the Nets' fourth best player in Joe Harris. Harris is an elite catch and shoot guy who the Nets sometimes run off of screens to generate open looks. Because of Bryn's slight frame, he can struggle to get through screens. So if Brooklyn is running Harris off of all kinds of screening actions, having someone that can't get through screens is not a good idea because it will allow Joe to get wide open for plenty of open looks from beyond the arc. Even if Brooklyn is using Harris as a stationary spot-up shooter instead of a movement one, Bryn likely will not have enough length to contest Harris's catch-and-shoot jumpers, so I do think that the Bucks have better matchups against Joe Harris, namely Chris Middleton, who can use his length to contest plenty of those shots. I think for Bryn to get more than 10 minutes per game, he'll probably have to spend some time at least on Joe Harris. I just don't know how well that'll end for Milwaukee. If Bryn isn't on Harris or one of the Nets' big three players, he'll obviously be defending one of Brooklyn's role players. That will likely be some combination of Bruce Brown, Blake Griffin, Nick Claxton, Landry Shamet, and potentially Timothé Luwawu-Cabarrot. I think that if Bryn Forbes is defending Bruce Brown, he probably should be just fine. He matches up fairly evenly in terms of size, and the Nets usually don't like to get Brown involved in their primary offensive actions whenever one of their big three players is on the court. All of their big three players are on the court. When one or two of those guys is off the court at any part of the game, they will likely run some pick and roll screen actions where Brown is the guy running to the basket. But in those cases, I still think I'd be comfortable with Forbes defending Brown because he's good enough positionally to keep himself between Brown and the rim. Shamet is probably the single best matchup for Forbes to defend in this series. Shamet profiles very similarly to Bryn as an undersized shooting specialist, so he won't be able to capitalize off of Bryn's defensive lack of skill and size. I'm unsure of how much Shamet will actually play in this series because he has a bunch of defensive struggles of his own that the Bucks could exploit, but when he is out there, he provides a solid option for the Bucks to put Forbes on. Timothé Luwawu-Cabarrot barely played in the first round against Boston, but if he does get time in this second round series, I'm sure Forbes will spend some time guarding him. TLC has a bit more on-the-ball pop than Shamet does, but he still likely won't handle the ball much in Brooklyn's loaded offense. So I do think that this is a solid matchup for Forbes. Either Shamet or Luwawu-Cabarrot function as solid hiding spots for Forbes whenever one of those two guys is playing. The last guys in Brooklyn's rotation are Blake Griffin and Nick Claxton, but each of those guys have too much size for Forbes to viably defend them. Forbes is a very interesting player heading into this series against the Nets. If he can be serviceable defensively, he could swing entire games with his shooting. If Brooklyn kills him defensively, he also might not play at all. So there's a wide range of outcomes for Bryn Forbes in this series. Hopefully for the Bucks, he gets going and hits shots while also being okay defensively, but if he doesn't, I think we're going to be seeing a whole lot of Pat Connaughton in this series. Let me know what your thoughts are on Bryn Forbes in the comment section down below. Do you think he'll be able to hang in there on defense? Be sure to leave a like and subscribe, especially if you are a fellow Bucks believer. This is the place for you. I think that I've covered everything that I wanted to cover, so that's going to be it for me. Ladies and gentlemen, I will see you all again very soon.